Hi everyone, Rick Russell here. Stand by for channel markers.
Filing in astern of the Enterprise, North Carolina's impressive anti-aircraft battery of 50 caliber, 20 millimeter, 1.1 inch, and 5-inch guns sounded like a steady drum roll as she laid a blanket of steel over the carrier. Witnesses were convinced she had caught fire.
Battleship North Carolina holds a special place in American naval history. In the World War II era, she gave her name to the first class of U.S. fast battleships. In 1941, the Showboat was the U.S. Navy's first battleship commissioned in 18 years. In August 1942, in a Guadalcanal campaign, she became the first of the new American battleships to take the enemy under fire when she delivered an eye-watering defensive enterprise in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. What's interesting is North Carolina became a far more powerful gun platform after her debut performance. Today we'll review the changes made to the battleship's anti-aircraft battery from her commissioning to the end of the war and offer a few insights into what worked and what didn't. By the time North Carolina was launched on 13 June 1940, the Navy already knew both its short-range 50 caliber Browning M2 water-cooled machine gun and intermediate-range 1.1-inch 75 caliber gun, the so-called Chicago Piano, were inadequate. The Brownings didn't have the stopping power the Navy wanted. The 1.1-inch was too complex, too heavy for the firepower provided, and too difficult for crew other than highly skilled gunners to keep in action. As a result, in July, the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance purchased a twin-mount air-cooled 40mm, as well as spare parts and 3,000 rounds of ammunition directly from the Bofors Company of Sweden. In tests conducted at Dahlgren Proving Ground in Virginia, the Bofors gun demonstrated its clear superiority over all available competitors. Meanwhile, in August, the Navy also created an anti-aircraft defense board to study wartime shipboard defenses. Its chairman was Rear Admiral Ernest J. King. When the King Board issued its initial report on 26 December 1940, it put an official stamp on what officers in the fleet already knew. In terms of war readiness, the board stated the Navy's lack of automatic anti-aircraft weapons was its most serious weakness. With steps underway to solve this problem, King became personally involved in analyzing the anti-aircraft needs of individual ships and classes. On April 9, 1941, Battleship North Carolina was commissioned at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. On May 15th, in Philadelphia, the Navy commissioned her sister ship, Washington. And only 11 days later, the pride of the Kriegsmarine, new battleship Bismarck, after sinking HMS Hood and damaging new battleship Prince of Wales with main battery fire, failed to contend equally well with attacks by slow, fabric-covered swordfish biplanes and suffered a lucky but crippling torpedo hit that led to the ship's loss. Bismarck had gone to sea with a more robust AA battery than North Carolina and Washington. Whether a coincidence or not, the next month, the U.S. Navy finalized both the foreign and domestic contracts needed for U.S. companies to begin manufacturing the Bofors 40mm in the United States. North Carolina's original armament included 4 types of guns. As is well known, she had a main battery of 9 16-inch 45 caliber Mark VI guns arranged in 3 triple turrets, 2 forward and 1 aft. The other 3 types of guns could be used against aircraft. She had a secondary battery of 10 twin 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns with 5 turrets to a side. Until better weapons became available, she went to sea with 4 quad 1.1-inch mounts with 1 placed at each quarter in the superstructure, and 12 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, all installed on the main deck in unprotected positions. At the time, the Navy was hustling to replace the Brownings with the Swiss 20mm Oerlikon autocannons. By the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the fleet had received 0 40mm and only 379 20mm. But in December, before North Carolina steamed north to Maine, where she trained and served as a backstop against a breakout by German surface raiders, she received her first consignment of 20mm, 35 mounts in total, 28 installed on the main deck from stem to stern, 4 in the forward superstructure, and 3 on top of the aft main battery turret. The Navy began to receive twin 40s in January 1942, but the first quad mounts weren't ready until late spring. By then, North Carolina was well on her way to Pearl Harbor. Until the 40 and 20 millimeter guns became available in greater numbers, mixed batteries of 4 and sometimes 5 different types of anti-aircraft guns were the norm on the first 5 new battleships. In North Carolina's case, being the first to fight meant being last in line for the new 40 millimeters. In February, the number of Brownings on board North Carolina was doubled from 12 to at least 24, but possibly 28. Sources vary. So the AA battery she took to the Pacific and carried into battle on 24 August comprised 25-inch guns, 4 quad 1.1-inch guns, 35 20 millimeters, and at least 24 Brownings. We've covered North Carolina's baptism of fire at Eastern Solomons in more than one video, but suffice it to say the 5-inch 38s performed beautifully, in part because there were far fewer AA positions to limit their arcs of fire. Because air defense at this time was close in, the real star might have been the 20 millimeter gun, and gunnery officers were already making it their personal quest to add as many of them as possible to their ships. Every trip to Pearl Harbor meant a chance to add more guns. Unfortunately, North Carolina's next trip to Hawaii came the hard way. On September 15, 1942, in one of the most improbably effective torpedo spreads of the war, Japanese submarine I-19 successfully attacked carrier Wasp in one task force, but also struck the destroyer O'Brien and North Carolina in another. Wasp was turned into a flaming wreck and lost. O'Brien would eventually sink too. The torpedo that hit North Carolina struck slightly forward of the main battery turret. It tore an 18 by 32-foot hole to the sea, cracked the armor plate, flooded the holding bulkhead, and killed 5 men. After dusk, she withdrew first to Tonga Taboo to make emergency repairs, then Pearl Harbor for permanent repairs and a badly needed overhaul. With the Navy intent on adding as many 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter guns as possible to the fleet, in November 1942, yard workers at Pearl Harbor finally removed all 1.1-inch and 50 caliber guns from North Carolina. In their place, she received 10 quad 40 millimeter mounts and 5 more 20 millimeter guns, making a total of 40 barrels of each type. The increased offensive capabilities of aircraft were nearly balanced by parallel improvements in anti-aircraft fire control during 1942 and 1943. For example, in early 1943, North Carolina's gunnery department devised a way to link the 40 millimeter guns to the radar fire-controlled 5-inch guns, providing blind firing control to the 40s, allowing them to engage sooner. In June 1943, North Carolina received 4 more quad 40 millimeter mounts, raising her total number of barrels from 40 to 56. In November, a 15th quad 40 was installed on top of the aft main battery turret, making 60 40 millimeter barrels in total. The number of 20 millimeter also increased from 40 to 46. As an aside, by increasing the number of anti-aircraft guns, battleships experienced a corresponding reduction in their main and secondary battery firing arcs because so much deck and superstructure space had been taken over by the 40 and 20 millimeter guns. As their effectiveness increased, the effectiveness of the secondary battery went down. By late 1943, the effectiveness of U.S. anti-aircraft fire had already forced the Japanese to alter their tactics, for example, by trying nighttime air attacks. But the real game changer was the introduction and efficiency of the proximity fuse. It changed the balance of power significantly. From late 1943 on, aircraft could no longer attack warships with anything like the relative impunity they had enjoyed earlier. In 1944, the guns kept coming. In March, 7 more 20 millimeter guns were added. In terms of barrels, the battleship's AA firepower would never be greater: 25-inch, 60 40 millimeter, and 53 20 millimeter guns. In Japan's desperate search for new tactics, they responded with a kamikaze. As one historian wrote, quote, "The gruesome mathematics was clear. Losing all of your aircraft and hitting much of the time was better than losing most of your aircraft and hardly hitting at all," unquote. Ironically, because the proximity fuse led indirectly to the use of suicide tactics, its use may have contributed to the loss of more American lives than it saved. In November 1944, North Carolina's AA battery was altered for the last time during the war when the number of 20 millimeter guns was reduced from 53 to 48. The Navy's long tradition of adding as much firepower as possible to its ships during wartime goes hand in hand with building large, heavy, general-purpose warships. These are the ships most easily upgraded and upgunned. Even though President Roosevelt joked that, to the Navy, GP stood for gold-plated because the ships the Navy wanted invariably took longer to build, required larger crews, and cost more, they were, and still are, the better peacetime buy, like North Carolina. As hand-me-down quad 1.1-inch guns bounced around the fleet, ship to ship, the Navy bulked up on 40 and 20 millimeter guns. By the end of the war, over 2,300 quad, nearly 10,000 twin, and more than 10,000 single 40 millimeter mounts had been delivered to the Navy and Allied forces. As for the popular 20 millimeter, often considered the premier AA weapon, almost 125,000 complete assemblies had been delivered. During the Pacific War, Battleship North Carolina was credited with shooting down 24 Japanese aircraft and assisting with the shoot-downs of many others. If you haven't done it yet and are so inclined and able, visit the battleship in Wilmington, where you can strap yourself into a 20 millimeter or hand crank a 40. That's all for this channel marker. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment or recommend another subject below. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.